Reach right on that.
Yeah, sitting there. Yeah, that
All right, whenever you're ready.
Okay.
5:31 in Union Street. Oh, what happens here?
Really?
Nice. Making a left turn up the ramp, head towards Fence Court.
Hello.
Left lane, stop.
Good afternoon. Right? Afternoon now?
Yeah.
We made it.
I would say that's
Most people are right lane. Oh, my God.
My name is Tamara Turcott, and I'm a professional organizer. I'm very excited to be here today. I'm a member of, well, it was recently the National Association of Professional Organizers, and now we are the National Association of Productivity and Organizing. I can't quite get used to the name change, so I have to read it every time. So I was asked to come in today and talk about organizing. I do both business organizing and home organizing, and I've been doing it a little over 5 years professionally and my whole life. Otherwise, I actually originally worked in the corporate world. I was a member of management, so I'm pretty excited about a couple of the productivity questions because I got to use them myself in my previous life. For the most part, I'm just gonna let you know my PowerPoint is kind of just for my own guidelines. It's questions that were sent to me in advance so that we have a little bit of direction, but feel free to pop in if it spurs a question on you. I'm very happy to answer anything. So I guess let's get started. The topics that were sent to me today included topics that had to do with work. It was about both productivity best practices and filing best practices. Then I also had some home questions about organizing spaces and especially about things like memorabilia, things that were handed down to us. I want everybody to know that these are best practices only. Everybody is different. If a system works for one person, it may not work for somebody else. Then again, don't assume if I say that there's a best practice out there and you think, well, that's stupid. If you haven't tried it, you don't know it might actually work for you. I've had that happen with a lot of clients. So just know if you give a system a try, know if it's the system that's failing or you're really not giving it a try. All right, let's get started. So these are the questions that were given to me in regards to productivity. The first one was best practices as it relates to using and creating personal to-do lists, both long-term and daily tasks. How do I organize a long list of deadline-driven tasks efficiently and prioritizing and time management at work? Coincidentally, I was actually back in my previous life as a management at a corporation. I was given a big course done by Franklin Covey, and it was based on these exact things. So kind of the answer to all these questions are mushed into one, which is why they're on the same slide. I just want to preface that I don't work for Franklin Covey. I never did. They don't pay me. I'm not advertising for them. It's just when I took this series from them, this is what I took away from it, and this is the way I actually organized my work life. So I thought it was a best practice to bring to you guys. The first thing is to know what's urgent. This is right out of Franklin Covey. I'm not going to straight up read it to you guys. But the main thing is knowing what's currently most pressing, what has a fire under it right now. So for instance, something that has a deadline, or you've been working on something and a crisis comes up. There's also things that are important, but not necessarily urgent that you can hold off on. There are interruptions that are urgent, like your phone ringing, and you have to decide, am I going to answer this right now, or is there an urgency for what is at hand? Do I let it go to voicemail? And then there's the things like taking that 5-minute break to check social media, which is important. And to tell you the truth, there are studies out there that say if you are under a lot of pressure, you need to take a 5-minute break and step away from it and do something that clears your mind. So that is actually part of prioritizing. But the most important thing is knowing what is most urgent to you. And then prioritizing it. And this is the part where this is straight out from Franklin Covey. I do this mentally, but I'm going to show you guys what they taught me that it is a good thing to start doing until you get the practice going. And I apologize, I don't know how big this came out or didn't come out, but what we're looking at is it actually asks you to prioritize each of the tasks and give it a letter and then a number. So most important would be, if I remember correctly, it's A, yep. So you give it an A if it's the highest priority, it must be done, for instance, today. A B if you'd like to get to it today. A C if maybe that can wait till later in the week, but if you get to it, great. A D if it's really not that important, but it's still on your wish list. And then from there, they say, take all your A's and prioritize those. What should you do in what order? And sometimes that's actually going to be in the order that things need to be done, because, you know, I can't think of an example off the top of my head right now, but obviously sometimes things need to be done in a certain order. You can't get to step 2 unless you've completed step 1. So this is, I mean, how I make lists myself now. I don't put A's and B's and C's down, but I'm sure everybody has lists out there of things that they're to do, and they stare at this big list, or you stare at this big list, and you don't know where to start. This is how you decide where to start. You assign things, what is most important to finish today. The last thing is decide how you're going to keep the list. A lot of people are paper people. A lot of people use their email as their prioritization. So they'll keep the email there and then delete it once it's done. There are phone apps out there, To Do Rabbit and things like that you can look into. I just use my notes on my iPhone. I literally just pull up a new note and I make my list of the to-dos. It's very satisfying to watch that list get smaller and smaller and smaller. I pull them off as it's done. So it's so nice at the end of the day or at the end of the week to go delete. So however you keep that list, I tend to be paper-free. I tend to recommend paper-free because those lists get lost. Those lists you have to rewrite them. If you're adding to the list, it's less satisfying to not get rid of the list. So I recommend electronic if you're comfortable with electronic, but to each his own, because again, best practices. Filing. Let's see. How to keep up with current filing, how to manage files, use daily versus how to manage files once a week, once a month, how to keep track of files based on the status of a job, how to label files, papers and notes. Somebody said, I'm flooded with notes and messages at home and office, help. Tips and suggestions for efficient and organized note-taking and space at the office. Construction estimating project linger, so having folders stored for long periods of time. So the first part we're going to talk about that is filing papers. And this is, I'm not going to reread those. Those are just the questions that pertain to filing papers. So I file papers in one of 2 different ways. And I know this says computer filing system, which actually I also recommend this for computer filing. But all of our brains think differently. The way my brain thinks is in category, subcategory, subcategory, subcategory. So for instance, if I was working on a project, I might have one large area for this is the project. And then the next folders will be subcategories of that project. And perhaps even inside there might be more subcategories. But for my brain, it is easier to find what I'm looking for, which really that is what filing is about. It's not about stashing papers. It's about being able to quickly access what you are looking for when you need to look for it. So for me, this computer filing system and a file folder system works great. I've even worked with clients where I separate whole drawers in their home where this is their more business-like and this is their personal, and it's two different drawers. So that business goes business, and then credit cards, and then the separate credit cards. And then the lower drawer might be personal, and this is pets, and then each pet's name, and this is a child, and each child's name. So it drills down. That is one way to organize. But I want to make it clear, if you're an alphabetical person and your brain doesn't think in subcategories like that, there is nothing wrong with that. I think the biggest thing with filing papers is that you put them away right away. So the biggest thing is, if you have a huge stack of papers on your desk, that is overwhelming. And to have to sit there and spend the next hour trying to figure out which folder they all go into, it's maddening. And honestly, it's a waste of time. And it's actually one of those things that you procrastinate on, it just gets worse and worse and worse, and you never get to it. So my suggestion is when you start a project or when you notice that there is a need for a folder, you create that folder immediately and go ahead and file that immediately. 3 or 4 papers is not crazy talk to have to file up at the end of the day, but a stack this big, I don't want to file that either. And then the other thing is really only filing what's important. That's a very personal thing. Some of us have grown up in a more paper-free environment. We feel more comfortable with less paper. Some of us at our home and our offices feel like everything needs a paper trail. Somebody might come and ask me about that credit card bill from 1993. I don't know that anybody ever has, but I've gone through that with people where we're purging things from the 90s. So just be aware that you don't want to overwhelm yourself. Same as with that large stack of paper, you also don't want your files to be overwhelming. So really, really try and, I guess, prioritize and know what is truly important to your project, what is truly important to your home, what is truly important to your finances. What will you really, truly be asked about again or need to reference again? I already said that. Immediately file. And by immediately, I don't mean that second, but I would file every day or two at minimum. Getting into the habit is, they say it's about 3 weeks to make a habit. So this is one of those things where before I said, know if the system is failing you or if you're failing the system. If you tell yourself, I refuse to leave papers on my desk when I go home from work, they will be filed. Give yourself 3 weeks to do that. Maybe it really isn't you. Maybe it is just too much. Maybe you have to find your own system. But telling yourself, I refuse to leave with these papers on my desk for 3 weeks, there's a good chance you're going to make that habit. And if not, you find yourself, you figure out, well, is it once a week? Is it calling somebody else to file it for me? Just kidding. All right, the other part was notes and memos. So I'm flooded with notes and messages at the home office. Help. I realize between home and office, you're going to be taking a phone call, taking down notes, and I'm still actually paper-based when I talk on the telephone with new clients. Or I mean, it's ridiculous to think I'm going to pull out my laptop or I'm going to pull out my iPhone. I mean, I guess sometimes I throw myself on speakerphone and type something in. But for the most part, I really do walk around with Post-its in my bag, in my car. So that way my brain still doesn't think fast enough to type it in. But the thing is that once I have that note, I add it to whatever to-do. Am I lost? Oh, there we go. I add it to whatever to-do list that it needs to go to, or I add it to my calendar immediately, or I email myself immediately. Something so that now I actually have that memo in the right place, as opposed to that pile of floating papers in the corner of the desk, or on the refrigerator, or next to the toaster. Those papers definitely pile up and they become as overwhelming as that pile of papers in the corner of your desk. And who wants to deal with all of these to-dos over here? So immediately get them in one place. As far as taking notes, here we are, taking notes. So my best practices for taking notes have to do with the fact that I have, I have ADD. So when I sat in a meeting like this or in a classroom, I actually couldn't pay attention unless I was writing. So my whole tips do include, if you are listening to a speech, if you're listening to someone, write large headings about what topic they're talking about. Underline things that you find important. And then the biggest thing is, I have absolutely worked with people who have gone to seminar after seminar after seminar and I recognized immediately that they had also had ADD and needed to take notes to keep themselves actively listening. They never referenced those notes again because it really was just to keep yourself active. So in this case, if you are in a seminar and you're taking notes, for instance, I took that Franklin Covey, if you really do see something that is a takeaway for you, something you want to remember, something that you think will benefit your business later, anything, recognize that and actually file it. I actually wouldn't even file that whole note. I would make a separate note for yourself or email it to yourself, however you keep special items for you. I mean, I really do live in my notes on my iPad. But recognize that you're never going to go for a 3-page book of notes to go find that one really great quote you heard. So know ourselves, know that we don't go back and access piles and piles of paper willingly unless we remember, oh, didn't I hear, where did I put that? And then you actually spend more time than necessary looking for it. So most of these best practices that we're talking about right now are really to save you time. It's not about neatness, although neatness is lovely. It really is about making sure that you're not wasting your precious time, because that really is true. Our lives are so busy and our time is so precious, and who wants to spend time looking for a file, looking for a quote that you know is going to go great in your email, looking for your kids' swim list. Know where you're looking for things. Home organization. How do I utilize items I don't use frequently but use on occasion? Both home and work, which are the same in this case. Help with organizing my garage. How can I streamline the process of organizing my clothes closet during the seasonal weather transitional periods? Right about now, yay, spring! I can't wait. When should spring cleaning begin? When should I toss and donate? And I don't have enough kitchen space. So let's talk about home organization. And it does actually work into business organization too. But most importantly, get rid of stuff. We were talking about that with the files. We're going to talk about that with home organization. If you feel overwhelmed, 99% chance you have too much stuff. You have saved too much, whether it's notes, whether it's memorabilia, whether it is that toaster that does work, but you got a new one and so you stashed it in the basement. Stuff is really what our problem is. And we are a commercialized society. That's just who we are. It started, in case anybody wants a little history lesson, it starts back in the Depression when our parents' had nothing and taught our parents to save every piece of string, every extra screw that comes with every kit, every bill. Like you didn't want to lose anything because it wasn't necessarily easily replaceable. Then the 50s came along and everybody felt better again and everybody started buying stuff. And we all were already taught, we being our parents in this case, were already taught you save everything. So even though you could buy that new toaster because it's really nice with the 6 slices, that 2-slice toaster, it still works. Why would I throw that away? So this is, it's stuff. Stuff is where our problem is. So once we've figured out what stuff to get rid of, you want to keep like items with like items, and it is just like filing papers. And by the way, if you're not already filing papers like that, keep like items with like items. So for instance, your baking goods. Baking goods should be with baking goods. You don't want to go looking for that one cake pan that you know exists somewhere unless it's a holiday cake pan that's with your holiday stuff. Same with your screwdrivers. You want all your screwdrivers together. You don't want to have to fish through an entire bin of all your miscellaneous tools to look for that one screwdriver. I mean, it goes without saying, let's be real. If you have all your screws in one place, you want the ones that have the flathead different from the ones that have the, I'm sorry, Phillips head. My brain isn't working today. You'd be surprised. I actually do a lot of construction stuff. And then the question about where to store things. So your most regularly used items should be most accessible, and that's for both home and office. So if every single day you're using your coffee filters, putting your coffee filters in the way back of a cabinet, that's dumb. Same thing with if you have a regular to-do list on your desk. Well, that to-do list, even if you have it, let's say you embrace my folders idea, and one of the things you did was create a current to-do file, which, by the way, I actually do with a lot of people. It's a great thing to do. But that file, I don't care if it's a T. That file should be in the front because it is the most accessed item. So things that you don't regularly use, the bundt pan that looks like Santa's face. Those can be stored up and away, way in the back. Those kale chips you really should eat. Okay, no, really those should be stored up front so you eat them. But things that you don't really use regularly, those are the things that get pushed to the back, get put up high. And the things that you need every day, part of our precious time is making sure that you're not wasting time hiding things on yourself. I am a big proponent of only keeping a few things out because our mind does actually see clutter. Our amygdala is always working. So a lot of clutter out actually clouds our brain and makes us think that we have unfinished business. So I'm a proponent of it, unless it's an appliance that's used literally every day, putting those appliances away. But definitely you don't want to be wasting your time or cluttering your brain. So I think I've made the point. I think we're good. What to do with all the family stuff that has been passed down to me. So this is a touchy one because I'm sure everybody has been given things from their family members. And unfortunately for us, our family members don't always live forever. And by not always, it turns out life is 100% fatal. So these things really do mean something to us. So this time I'm really truly reading a list for us. So the first thing you want to ask yourself of this item is, do I need this item? And I don't mean do I need this item emotionally, I mean literally need this item. Did, mom's old bundt pan, do I have a bundt pan? Am I going to use this bundt pan? So literally question of, is this something that does not already exist and I need this? Why am I keeping this? And so it comes back to, am I trying to keep this item because I need this item? Or am I keeping this item because of feelings that I have about this item because of who has given it to me? So then you would ask yourself, do I need this item in this form? just last night I was at a networking dinner, and two women were telling me about all the wonderful medals that their father was given, and their father's obviously since passed. These were wonderful military medals. Those are really special. The question is, to know that your father got these medals, do you need to be holding it? Is this something that you can take a picture of? Or is it something you do want to display? We talked about holding the item and seeing what you feel. Some of you may have actually seen on Netflix or a book. There's a woman named Marie Kondo. She talks about spark joy. I love that she coined this phrase, but it is not really new. Organizers have been doing this the whole time. And it really is about holding the item and seeing, does it evoke a feeling? And is that feeling, I'm going to do a little imitation of Marie Kondo if you have never seen her. I hope it's okay. She goes, so if you're not getting that feeling out of the item, then the emotion that you're feeling is something a little bit different than joy. It may be guilt. Dad worked so hard to get this. He gave his time. He risked his life. And this medal came from him doing that. I'm not saying don't honor whatever item it is, but if it doesn't give you that joyful feeling, or you don't have a need to display it, it may be time. And to tell you the truth, there's other places that these medals can go so that you can keep them. And I mean, there are collectors out there who it really does spark joy for. So perhaps it's taking a picture, making yourself a photo book, and giving them away, or selling them. There we go. Does someone else need this? So any kind of item. So for instance, I really don't have a toaster, by the way. I don't know where I got toaster today. I don't even own a toaster. But you know, that two-slice toaster that's sitting in your basement, do you need it? Or does giving it away mean that someone else will now have access to a toaster, whether that's going to a secondhand store where it will be sold and the money will be used to help people, or if it's someplace like Storehouse that actually does give household items to the poor. So are you holding on to something that was given to you simply because you feel like you should hold on to it? These candlesticks that mom loved, but I think they're ugly. You know, should they really be there? Take a picture, pass them on. That money actually will go to help people. And to tell you the truth, if anybody wants resources, not that Goodwill isn't a great place, but it's a national place. We have a lot of resources here in Rochester to be able to donate, where you know that your money is actually staying in the community and helping the people that we see every day looking for help. So it's really wonderful. I'm big on trying to stay local on that. What is the emotional value to this item? So for instance, let's come back to those candlesticks. Wow, every Christmas mom put out these candlesticks and it meant so much to her. I'm going to put them out every Christmas and honor her. Cool, then stay. But if the emotional value is, mom made all these lace doilies, I can't stand lace doilies. I don't want these. Okay, cool, frame one if it really, but I don't know that our loved ones are really wanting us to hold on to things that make us feel guilty. So what is the emotion that you're feeling with it? Is it guilt? Is it pride? Is it joy? Why are they in our home? What is the intrinsic value of the item? That's a great one. Things do have value. I'm going to back up and say, back when I talked about the 50s and everybody got stuff and most of our parents were around during that time frame, they bought all this beautiful furniture. It's all great wood furniture. They told us how good it is. Unfortunately, that generation is now downsizing and unfortunately dying. There are a lot of estate sales out there, a lot of clean outs, because of downsizing. those things don't actually have a value. The value of something is what will someone pay for it right now. And because the market is inundated, not much. So you have to ask yourself, is it worth me posting this on Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, whatever, or is it worth me just going ahead and donating it and making sure that it's going to help somebody else who doesn't have? For instance, there's refugee centers that take furniture. There are other things that do have an intrinsic value. If mom collected Hummels, there are a handful of Hummels out there that do have value, and just handing away $300 is silly. Or that silver that you will never take the time to wash, it has a value. It is actually the value of its weight, whatever silver is going for today. So these are things that you wouldn't just give away. The quick thing I'll just say is if you think something has value, the resource that I use is eBay. And if you go to eBay real quickly, type in your item, look for something similar, but then scroll and change it to sold. If an item has been sold at whatever value you see, then that is the value of it. Someone would buy it at that. Old typewriters, for instance, some of them are going for like $100. It's crazy. I mean, it's not crazy, they're very cool, but if you have an old typewriter, look up that old typewriter, check sold before you decide that it has value. And then you could go eBay, you could contact an antique dealer around here. Obviously, if you're going through an antique dealer, they will pay less than what the value is that you see, because they have to resell it. But just know if your item has intrinsic value. Unfortunately, most of the items that you have that are memorabilia probably don't. I have a lot of experience doing clean outs, making sure, double checking if things have value. It's very infrequently I find something with enough value to be worth our time. Because again, that's my biggest commodity, is my time. How is it adding or subtracting to my life? I think we've kind of already touched on this. If it's bringing me joy, if it's something that I'm going to use, that's going to make me smile every year, it's going to make me think of the person that has given it to me, and I'm going to access it frequently. It's one thing if I have an item that I look at and now it's just given me this great memory, but I'm not going to look at it for another 30 years. It's probably not adding to my life. That'd be worth a picture. More likely, you might go into your basement and see stuff, and you're just overwhelmed by stuff. It's actually subtracting from your life. And I don't think our loved ones, I'm assuming you don't think your loved ones as well, want to have your life subtracted from. So just recognize that these things that were given to us or are special to us, and I keep talking about it more like somebody gave this stuff to us. This is our memories too, our own memories, our college Greek life. Oh, look, my big made me that shirt. So is that really adding to our life right now, or is that worth a picture? And if you decide after all that, no way, Samara, you're crazy, I am keeping this. How will I store it? Please don't go out and buy a storage unit to store a bunch of furniture that you are never going to use. Please, please. I've seen that too many times. But if you really are going to keep it, then it comes back to how will I store this? Because you're keeping it for a reason. You'll want to access it again. So my recommendations are always keeping like items with like items, keeping things in bins. If they are in basements, do not store them in cardboard. It holds moisture, it can bring pests. You will be storing something to look back on it 20 years from now, and it's probably going to be moldy or chewed or something. So please, please, please use plastic. And how long will I store this? And it just comes back to, am I really going to look at this ever again? Is it going to be worth my time? And I'm going to come back and say, you know what? Sometimes you're going to make the decisions and then come back later and make a different decision. I have gone through a major loss in my life, and over the course of, it'll be 8 years now in May that I lost my husband. And I have been going through different sections of getting rid of his stuff. I don't want him out of my, well, I don't want him out of my life. His memory is gone or anything like that. But, you know, the pair of shoes that I knew he wore every night at work, covered in mud and beer. He was bartending. You know, I can't do anything with those. I can't donate those. They're not going to help anybody. But how many times am I going to look at these shoes and hold on to them? And just so you know, it's been 8 years and they are still there. And I do, they're near my laundry. So I look at them occasionally and I smile. Until I stop smiling, I guess they're staying. But there's no item that's too weird. I mean, I'm standing here telling you a disgusting, gross pair of, they probably don't smell anymore, but beer covered, just the swill from behind the bar. Just disgusting. They can't even leave my basement. But they still mean something to me. So there's no right or wrong here. It is really what is the emotion that you're feeling about it. And so if you're going to store it and revisit it, great. But truly ask yourself, am I going to revisit this? If you're not, go. If you are, how long? This is where I will open it up to questions of any kind. I realize I kind of followed a deck given to me, but I'm totally open to anything. Anybody at all?
How often do you recommend going through kids' toys?
So the question is, how often do you recommend going through kids' toys? Every time they drive you nuts? No, just kidding. Well, and that's the thing. So with kids' toys, that's a great topic. You kind of already know your kids' habits. You are, not kind of, you are an expert on your children. So I've had a lot of people worry that their children are going to notice something is missing. If you are overwhelmed by the clutter, truly, every time it annoys you, take a couple things out, put them away in case you're scared that it's too fast, but take them out of sight, out of mind, and if they don't ask for them, you're actually going to do it as time goes on. Obviously, your children go out of toys. I would go through them about once a year if you're not actually just watching, but everybody in this room knows what their kids play with. And if they notice, you know, this game's been sitting over here, or that Playmobil is sitting over there and they haven't touched it in a couple months, just gently scoot it out. As they get a little bit older, it is easier to talk to your children about giving to people who don't have anything. I've had a lot of success working with children and asking them. It kind of all depends on your own child. I have literally worked with a 2-year-old. Of course, the mother was there. But I have worked with a 2-year-old, and we've discussed what he did or didn't want. I asked him, can we give this to children who have nothing? And he was happy to give them away. So you could start those habits with your children at any time. But truly, I say if you notice your child has stopped playing with something, take it away, hide it, and if in a few months they haven't asked for it, let it go. It could go to a family member, a friend who's about to have kids. It could go, obviously, to any of the places around here. For instance, Community Place does UPK programs, and they are always in desperate need of toys. It is for the most poor of our population, for families that need to obviously work and need a place for their children to go so they can work. So it's a win-win. Anybody else?
My question is about paper.
Mm-hmm.
Papers at home, personal paper, mail, all kinds of stuff that is name, address, and some things with other things. What is the best way to, like, I keep a box.
Like a shred box, you mean?
Like a shred box, and then I'll, whenever they do those free, like.
Okay. So,
options to do it more regularly.
yeah, there's some best practices out there for too. So this is a question about papers, and it sounds like even more personal papers that have your address or your information on it. I know there's a lot of fear out there of identity theft as well. First of all, I'm going to say go with your own comfort level. Anything with a social security number on it, definitely shred. But I mean, technically our address is public knowledge out there. I'm helping a client right now with a court case. Turns out you can go right to the Monroe County website, put in the case number, it's there without logging in at all. So a lot of our stuff is more public than we actually think it is anyway. So us shredding it, it doesn't even matter, because chances are people aren't dumpster diving for your stuff. They're probably finding it electronically anyway. But as far as best practices for paper at home, and actually I'm going to extend this question out as well to junk mail. So the same thing that I talked about with filing is to deal with it right away. I actually recommend getting a home shredder. They're very inexpensive, and as long as the mail is coming in and you are taking care of it every day, a pile this big is 2 minutes of your day to come in, sort through, throw the recycle right in the recycle bin immediately, so that's not piling up on your counters, opening up your bills, ripping off the remit if you're going to use it. I, of course, go entirely electronic. It's on my list. But, and then shredding the rest of the bill immediately once you've already assessed that all the purchases are correct. So I have a client who had paper pileups. Right next to her front door is her shred bin and her recycle bin. So she comes in holding the mail, and before she takes 3 steps into her home, she has already shredded what she's not comfortable with, because she is really not comfortable with anything that has her name on it, which is fine. There's no judgment there. And then anything recycled, I guess, which basically is the stuff that says resident. Anything with her name on it, though, right into that shred, and it's sitting right next to her front door. Not everybody wants to live with a shred bin right next to their front door, but I mean, there are ways to do this, that you walk it right there. So my best practice for paper is to handle it daily. And to tell you the truth, you don't need a shredder, especially if you are only doing 3 or 4 papers a day. Just ripping the crap out of it. I mean, it's about the same thing. Especially, I mean, I've even ripped checkbooks with people, and I just make sure I'm ripping right through the account number, so that way if somebody really was dumpster diving, they'd really have quite a little puzzle to do.
We have another question on the webinar. How long should something sit on a shelf before getting rid of it? Is there a rule of thumb?
There are a couple general rules of thumb. I know that there's groups out there, minimalist groups. Oh, I'm sorry, let me repeat the question. How long should something sit on a shelf before getting rid of it? So minimalist groups would say 6 months to a year if you haven't used it to get rid of it. I don't really have rules. I will say, even organizing books, I don't necessarily go running to, because we're all so different. And I'm gonna even pull it back to clothes. There's that whole thing where you turn around the hangers, and if you haven't worn it all year, then it should leave. But especially for women, dude, that's coming back in style, and you're gonna want it in 6 years. So I'm not necessarily a huge proponent of does a time limit. So I would say if it's a year is really a good sense, because a year you'll probably hit all the holidays that you might have used it during, or any of the occasions that you might have used it. But if you have a favorite recipe that you always keep meaning to make, I mean, I guess if you're not going to make it for a few years, there is out there a minimalism rule as well that I was told by one of my clients, which is interesting. And it was 20-20-20, and I think it was, if you can replace it for under $20 and it's been sitting there, I can't even remember now what the 2020 was. Either way, the point is if it's very replaceable and it's just cluttering up, I would get rid of it within a year, probably. But if it's something that you haven't used just because, for instance, the style changed, like, you know, chunky heels are back in right this second. They're going to go back out again, and we're going to be back to the pointy heels, but chunky heels will come back again. So I'm okay with assessing, is this sitting here? Because I'm definitely going to use it again. But then on the other side, if you're looking at something on a shelf and you're like, I'm never going to touch that again. Dude, it should go right away. There's no need for a time limit on that. So I know that was kind of a wishy-washy answer. So about a year. Any other questions?
I think you did my neighbor's garage, Adrian.
I did.
She raved about you. So.
I did do her garage. That was a great project. So it wasn't a question, it was more of a accusation, and she was correct. That I did her neighbor's garage. And actually, that was a really fun project. Here, I'll go put up my website anyway. There's pictures on my website. What was that?
Did you end up with a lot of
No,
stuff?
I didn't take anything.
No, okay.
My garbage can, though, because her garbage can ran out of space.
Yeah. So the fun part of this was it was a surprise for her husband. So we didn't actually throw much away because that would be intrusive.
It would be a surprise, wouldn't it? It would be a surprise, it would be probably a little.
Yeah, so it would be intrusive for him to have come home and found his stuff gone. So what we ended up doing in there, it was fantastic. It was a 3.5-day project back when we were hitting 10 degrees and we were out in the garage, no heater. But no, we did great. We just stayed bundled up. And what we did was put in shelving because everything was just kind of stored everywhere. Her husband is of the mindset that if I put it there, I'll know to come back to it there. But he doesn't really do that. I mean, no, yes, we sometimes do. I remember putting that there, but after a certain amount of months, that pile becomes all of there. So we put in new shelving and we got plastic bins and we sorted everything like items by like items so that he could find all of his scrap wood in one place. All of his safety gear in another place, all of the car cleaning stuff in another place. But most of the things didn't leave. We just lined things up and put them like items with like items so we could find them. And because he wasn't there, it was a little bit of a learning curve for him. But I'm hearing it's going pretty well. She turns out to still be alive. And, so yeah, I did do that garage, and if anybody's interested, there are pictures on my website of that because it was a really fun before and after project. Anybody else? Yeah.
One of the challenges today is in the old days, you had your own file cabinet, you filed your own stuff away. Now in the electronic age, we're dealing with a lot of common folders. We all have access to the same folders, the same projects. We're sharing documentation electronically. If you have a couple organized people and a couple, I'll say, less organized people sharing that same Dropbox account, it can be challenging.
Yes, I would absolutely agree. And it actually, sometimes it's less organized. Sometimes it's less organized too. I'm sorry. The comment was that with shared folders, sometimes it's frustrating because different people file differently. Some people more mindlessly just dropping it somewhere, and some people very meticulously putting it in folder. And truly it is difficult because not everybody's brain thinks in those subfolders like the way mine does. Like I literally do, my brain thinks in a drill down. And sometimes when I'm organizing with people, I have to pull back and figure out how their brain works. My own suggestion would be if you feel like you're working on a project with someone whose brain works slightly different than yours. I don't know the protocol here, but anything that I need to know that I'm going to need to access quickly, I might temporarily bring a folder onto my own desktop to make sure that I have what I need very well taken care of. Either that or I have actually offered to organize for the team. So that then I could drill into things, and then I just became the go-to person. Where is my blank? Here it is. I found it for you a second later. So, yeah, I guess I would say figure out the level of your frustration with the fact that each of our brains think differently, because not for nothing, same with the filing, same with at home, that person who's just dumping, they're not actually being lazy. Their brain doesn't see it. They don't actually know that they're making life harder for somebody else. It is really, there are very few people out there that I can think of that are like, who cares about all of them? I'm going to throw it here. Well, maybe I'll see it or maybe I won't. It really is, they think that they're saving themselves time and not realizing that they're not saving anybody time.
On those same lines, what's your take on the person that likes to file, say, 8 folders deep electronically?
Yeah, so the question is the person who likes to file 8 folders deep electronically. What's my take on that? I have 2 people in my life, both a client and a mother, who like to hide things on me, themselves, everybody. I call it a bag within a bag within a bag within a bag within a bag. And so my take is not to over-organize as well. I would say making sure like items are together, but does it, do you need to be able to drill down 8 folders? Chances are you're also hiding it on yourself, because our brains don't necessarily remember the 8 levels deep. And even though the person who created those folders may think they are intuitive, I would say 3 subfolders is probably a good place to be, unless it's a very intricate project. Thank you. You'd think I'd done this before.
Kudos.
Thanks.
I like your comment about trying to, if you want to donate something, to donate locally first. Goodwill is great.
Yeah.
For, end of the road kind of stuff, but I like donating locally. Other than having to know a specific, is there a resource locally that'll give you like a list of a lot of different places?
Thank you for asking. So the question was, we like to stay local, and is there a resource out there for a lot of local resources? So one place that's very interesting is called Community Wishbook, and that's for more specialized items. So for instance, I have a dryer to give away. I just got a new dryer. Maybe somebody needs this. And a lot of places will pick up, by the way. So Community Wishbook. Coincidentally, and this is no advertisement for myself, I promise, at the website of aneyefordetailorganizing.com, I actually have a page that says resources. No, I'm sorry, it's on the services page. At the bottom of my services page, I have actually done a lot of local research for you. Community Wishbook is actually linked there, as well as Community Place, the Methodist Storehouse, Second Thought over in Piano Works Mall. But there is also a list of other places, Habitat for Humanity, muscular dystrophy for the wheelchairs and stuff. The ambulance companies will also take walkers. So I have actually done a list of resources on my page, which to tell you the truth, I did on purpose because I needed to be able to give my clients a very succinct place to go to. It was a little time to look for, but Community Wishbook is a great place to start.
Or even something like if you were looking to donate women's items to a women's shelter or something.
Yes. So just, to answer that specifically, the question was about a women's shelter. Willow is a place to donate to a women's shelter locally. But honestly, the other thing is being able to contact churches. Churches are very good with where they know where their resources need to go to. And to tell you the truth, Asbury Church on East Avenue, they do have a storehouse right there, and they work directly with. And then Community Place has 3 centers, and they work directly with homeless and shelters as well. There's also, in case you were curious, a lot of things for refugees. Mary's Place. I can't remember the name of the place in Pittsburgh. I want to say St. Charles. But there are a lot of things for battered women, for refugees, for especially right now. A good friend of mine is doing Dress for Success as well. She's the CEO of Dress for Success. And so business clothes, that's a great place to bring business clothes. And she also has community networking so that she would be able to get it to the battered women's shelters. Because for obvious reasons, those are more guarded. Yeah.
But they're hard to find.
Exactly. But to tell you the truth, speaking to someone at Willow, you would be able to probably do a drop-off somewhere that isn't necessarily where the women are staying. But those are actually gated. That's gated. It's great.
Thank you.
Yep. Anybody else? I piqued anybody's interest? You're going to go run home and organize a drawer?
Do you have anything messy in your house? Like one drawer that's not organized?
So funny you should ask. At this exact moment, well, yeah, I do actually. I was going to say, no, I don't. But so in my living space, no, I don't. And it's because I got a little cosmetic thing done on my forehead where like it was for like 3 days, I couldn't leave the house and I was going stir crazy. So I organized every last drawer, everything that had been sitting for just too long hidden. However, my basement actually is the last bastion of, we'll say, mess. My husband's stuff is mostly down there, and it's actually just because I don't feel like going down. It's not because I can't deal with it. There may be a very large engine that I can't get out of there on my own, but besides that, I really could clean down there. So yes, I actually have a basement space that's not my own storage. It was his storage, and I don't need anything in that area, so I hardly ever walk back there. It is on my to-do list for this spring, if it ever gets here. But yes, so that may be the last one, and that may end up as before and after pictures that maybe Adrienne will send out. Anybody else? I don't want to force questions. It's 1 o'clock anyway.
Thank you.
All right. Well, if anybody ever does, yes?
How do you force yourself to do something when you put it off for so long? What's a good motivator
You get married.
to finally get to that one part of something that out of your house or whatever that you want to, that you've been putting off?
Well, I hate to say just do it, but that really is. It's the same thing with dieting. It's the same thing with getting back to the gym. You just really have to tell yourself that is it. It is time. I'm doing it. Just set yourself up. I would say more so it's about motivating yourself to continue. And so what I have people do is start in a corner and work their way. If it's a room, if it's a drawer, I mean, hopefully you'll finish that drawer. Hopefully, I say. So I'd say if anything, you can, if it's going to motivate you, sit down on your phone, Google pictures of an organized garage, you know, whatever it is that you're going to work on, so that you can motivate yourself. And just remember that those are just pictures. Just doing it is good. There's no rules. You don't have to be Pinterest perfect. But being able to see your own progress, that is actually a huge motivator. Being able to look back on something, even if you have to go like this, just to see that space all by itself, it's just getting started is the motivation, and then being able to see the progress. So if anybody ends up leaving here today and you have any questions that you suddenly come up with, my website does actually have a way to contact me. I'm happy to always answer any questions at any point. I'm very quick to answer and happy to answer them. I like making the world neater one question at a time. Thank you so much for joining me today.